Hi, Brian Kurtz here. I wanted to share with you today uh, what I call knowing everything about one thing. And I'm going to tell a story about one of my mentors, Dick Benson, who was probably the smartest guy who ever lived as it pertained to direct mail. And Dick Benson was a consultant that we used at Boardroom. I used to spend a lot of time with him, both on the phone. He was actually known as the guy who never said goodbye on the phone. Like you would ask him a question, and as soon as he knew you got the answer, it was like click, right? So, phone manners aside, he really was the smartest guy in direct mail that I ever met. So the way you work with Dick is like you call him all the time, and then once a quarter or so, I would go down to visit him. He lived on Skidaway Island and Amelia Island in different times in his life, off the coast of Savannah and Jacksonville, Florida, and Savannah, Georgia. And I would go visit him, and I would spend the entire day there. And in advance of my visit, I would send a Federal Express package with every test that we had done in that quarter or over that 6 months, everything that we did at Boardroom, with all the results and everything that we could analyze. And we would just sit there and spend 8 or 9 hours with a break for lunch, going through every test. And he would say, do this, do that, don't do that. I remember one of the smartest things he ever said to me was, one of his rules of thumb is never test a self-mailer. And he saw how our magalogs were doing. Our magalogs were self-mailer. They look like magazines as direct mail packages. And he said, Brian, nobody should test a self-mailer, but I think you should test one because you needed more Boardroom needed more copy to sell. And so the space was used properly as opposed to improperly when people use self-mailers that were 3 or 4 pages. And so I think even on the stuff that were rules of thumb to him, he would break the rules. It's the old Picasso quote, follow the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. And that's, I think, how Benson worked as a consultant. So there was one of the first visits I went down there, though. We had spent the whole day. My expertise at the time was in the list business. So I would actually help him. He had 2 newsletters, health newsletters, and I would help him with his list work, which I talked about in my video about your mentors choose you. And one of the reasons why Dick and I became so close is that I helped him with his business as well on the list side, and then he became my mentor on so many different things. But that aside, at the end of one of those early days, I had helped him a lot during the day as well, besides him helping me. And I said to him, Dick, how'd you get so smart? Like, how'd you get so brilliant at what you do? And he just looked at me and he put his, thumb and index finger about, 3 inches apart. And he says, I know everything about this much. And what a lesson early in my career. And I used to, run the boardroom dinners at Boardroom with Marty Edelston. And we used to go around the table and everybody would share something in their expertise. And we had doctors and lawyers and people in all different walks of life. And what the beauty of those dinners were is that everybody was sharing everything about this much. Everybody was speaking in their passion. Everybody was speaking about something that they just, no one else could speak on that topic the way they could speak on it. Now, some of the people at the dinners would speak, they thought they knew everything about this much. You can't even see my hands, I think, on the screen. And of course, those people, Marty and I had to shut up pretty quickly because we don't want know-it-alls. But they might have known more than, the average bear on more things than that. But the idea of getting people to talk about what they're expert in is so cool. And it's come full circle in all of my consulting work now, specifically like with copywriters. When I'm working with copywriters and trying to get them to understand that if they could become an expert in this much first and be able to write copy that's incredible in that one niche or one specialization and just own it. Like own a niche before you own the world is what I like to say. And so you own that niche, and then as you get better and better as a copywriter, you would then expand out. And I think that's true in almost everything. Specialization over generalizations is always the best. And I'll just leave you with another quick story on this. I went to a conference once. Guy gets up in front of the conference. We were actually going to work on his business. It was kind of a hot seat. And he said, I want to do a new product, and I want to do a product that's going to help men in their midlife crisis, going through a midlife crisis. And I'm like, oh man, what qualifies this guy to do that? And then he talked about how he had gone through his own midlife crises, that he almost committed suicide, he lost his wife, his job, and then he came out the other end bigger, better, etc. I said, all right, that's a good hero's journey. I thought that was pretty good. But then I said, it's still not specialized enough. How's he going to relate to an audience? How's he going to get to what we call the avatar, the list of people that are going to be so ingrained with his message? And so I said, what'd you do when you had your nervous breakdown? And he said, I was a lawyer. And I said, well, why don't you start there? Like, why don't you help lawyers in midlife crises first? Why don't you help those people and then branch out? Because whatever you're going to teach is probably good for a lot of people in a lot of different categories and professions. But the idea of starting in a specialization first is so much more valuable and then going out. So, having learned that lesson from Benson, knowing everything about this much at the beginning of my career and still using it today to help coach people on the power of specialization, the power of niche before broad, is something that stays with me every day. And I really wanted to share it with you today. So I hope that was useful, and love to hear your comments. Thanks.